Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Tamalkov.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to welcome an amazing guest tonight. Tonight, my night. For you, Jay, you're joining from different parts of the world, from US, and thank you for making the time. First of all, I wanted to share, we have a mission to bring some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world. And today, we're very excited to have you, someone who's actually made so much great contribution to the world, and an author of one of the amazing book, The One Thing, which I would like to talk about as well. And also a great contributor for many amazing impacts, not to mention in business, but also giving back to the world. Also someone who is deeply passionate about a topic that I love as well, which is how to have it all, that abundance in every area of your life. Welcome, Jay. Thank you for making the time to join us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be back.
Fantastic. Jay, there's so many questions, but of course, I would like to focus on the one thing that you actually talk about. And what inspired you to, first of all, write that book? And just share a little bit about your philosophy of this. That would be wonderful to hear.
Well, so I co-wrote it with Gary Keller, who founded what at this moment is the largest residential real estate company in the world. And so I've wow. 21 years we've worked together, and I guess 19 of those we've been writing partners. I had to do some math in my head there to make sure I was getting the right dates. And so we've written a lot of books together. So the book, The One Thing, showed up just before, I guess, 2008. And I had just finished, I was leading the learning group at that time as well. And we had just finished creating a course for real estate agents, kind of like how they could go from being a solopreneur to earning the right to hiring a team. We believe that's something that a business should earn, right? So that you can make sure that if you're going to hire someone, you can still pay them a year later. So I'd written the course with our team, and Gary took it home for the weekend. And he said, I just kind of wrote an inspirational intro. What do you think? And it was an essay called The Power of One. And I've been in publishing a long time. I used to work at HarperCollins. I've always kind of had my nose in books on one level or another, often with the kind of wearing the hat of publisher or author. And when I saw that essay, it really rang true because I'd already been working with Gary for a while. His true, greatest strength is his willingness to put as much effort as needed into identifying whatever the main priority should be. And then he's also willing to give the priority, as in singular, disproportionate resources and time. It's almost a joke. If you're in a meeting here, if you're number 3 or 4 on the agenda, you're not going. Because we'll start on whatever is number 1, we'll get to number 2, and then often we'll end up talking about number 1 again. Because wants to make sure as a leader of this group that we're always focused on what our number 1 thing is. So I read that essay and I was like, this is a book, and he agreed. And that's kind of the origin story for The One Thing.
Well, there's a lot of power in that, Jay. And I think we often find ourselves in this fantastic time we live in. We're blessed to have the best times and opportunities we ever had. But at the same time, we are overwhelmed with so much.
Right.
And I also had a privilege to talk to some of the extraordinary leaders from every corner. And of course, some of them are very successful in one thing, but they may struggle in another. And it's, and I also see, as someone that also deeply cares about the future generation and young people, they're also overwhelmed with that source of also the information, their parents, their social media is pushing them. So it's not an easy one to actually have abundance in every area of your life. And since we talk about the one thing, could the one thing philosophy and focus help out in all the other areas?
So I like the way you're provocatively setting this up, right? Because if you're going to build abundance in every area of your life, the simplest way to think about that is you have your personal life and your professional life.
Mm-hmm.
And you know this about me. I don't believe that success in one is mutually exclusive of success in the other. But that said, you don't get to do everything all the time. You have to prioritize. And often by saying no, you get more of the things that you want. It's very counterintuitive. I read an essay earlier about Warren Buffett. Have you studied Warren Buffett at all?
I have studied part of his philosophy and life, and it's fascinating, but maybe not as much as you have.
I'll just ask, maybe you know the answer. If not, I'll share it. But he's kind of famous. He spends as much as 5 hours a day doing what activity? Do you know? Reading. And people were like, Warren Buffett can read for 5 hours a day because he's Warren Buffett. And people often talk about Gary spending 3 to 5 hours a day on his one thing and say, oh, Gary can do that because he's Gary. They're missing the point. Warren Buffett is Warren Buffett because he does that. And Gary Keller is Gary Keller because he does that. They've effectively said no to a lot of nonsense. So Warren Buffett never does the quarterly calls with analysts, ever. He doesn't even have a stock ticker. I don't think he has a personal computer in his office. He's said no to a lot of things. And some people might think, well, he's given up a lot of things. And that might be true on some days. But he's led a life of simplicity and that has very exceptional outcomes. And I would say that that's kind of the path. Figure out the thing, your one thing. And right, we wrote a book about how to figure that out. And if you can give that thing disproportionate time, it's crazy how such a deep investment can actually lead to a lot of other doors opening. And I'll give you just one weird example. Gary Keller did not enroll in college. It's very hard for me to identify, having worked with him for 21 years, with someone who was graduating from high school with a Fu Manchu mustache, right? This is the 70s, who hadn't thought enough about the future to even plan or apply for college. He hadn't even applied. And his parents said, what are your plans? He had always wanted to be a rock and roll musician. And he was realizing that he might not have either enough desire or talent to make that happen. And he said as much to his parents. He goes, I'm not sure I'm good enough. And I think I'm going to have to enroll in college. And they said, well, we went ahead and did that for you. We went ahead and enrolled you in Baylor just in case. And so like that person, I can't believe he existed, but that's who he was. But along the way, he figured out that there was this focus that can come from it. So fast forward, he becomes very focused on success in real estate and then honestly, success through others. That's how you grow a giant company. It's not about being the best realtor, real estate professional. It's about being a great leader. And guess what he gets to do every single year? He gets to hold a concert with his house band in front of 11 or 12 or sometimes 14,000 people because he's got that audience and he gets to play with really famous musicians. So like unexpectedly, his one thing, real estate, being a great realtor and then being a great leader, has opened doors for him to fulfill his teenage dreams. And I think that if people are willing to put the investment up front, they might be surprised at what doors open on the backside.
I love what you
said. That's the best example. But that's what came to mind.
No, well, there's one other example that because I very much associate with that, and I understand, because it's so many things are coming from everywhere, a lot of information, and it's, sometimes you don't know which one, and I guess you got to see what works for you. But what I've noticed as well is just another example that I remember someone said about Nike. Nike had a campaign back in the days where they put $25,000 on 20 different players in NBA, and just to promote. But actually, one guy said, you know what? Just put all of your budget, $500,000, in one player. And that player was Michael Jordan. and he took that company to places that it's never been before. So I really believe in that. And there's also another thing, because there's a philosophy, a lot of, and because I'm very passionate about young people, I just want them to kind of really see your example. What would you do if you're in your 20s now? How would you approach life? Because young people don't know what that one thing is. They don't even know what they want to do. So I guess they need to try many things before they come to that one thing. But what would be your process or advice to them how to approach that?
So you're right. I actually got to Angela Duckworth. I'm a huge fan of her work. She allowed me to sit in on her class around grit, and she's basically teaching a lot of young people around the discipline of sticking to something for a long time. It takes grit. And she went through that very kind of idea that when you're young, I think it's a very small percentage of people who sometime in their childhood years, maybe teenage year, go, I want to be a surgeon. And it doesn't change.
Michael Phelps, 8 years old.
I know, but that's I think that it's extraordinary that happens. So it is noteworthy, but it's not normal. So first off, I would just say to any young person listening, it's totally normal not to have some road on the Damascus, moment where the light comes out of the clouds and it says, Marianne, you should be a chef. You should be a podcast host or whatever. It's like, no, that's not how it works. What happens is that we typically enjoy doing some things.
Yeah.
And the things that we enjoy doing, we tend to do more of. And when you put hours in, right, especially flow, as Mihai Csikszentmihalyi would say, that idea of being in flow, we start to develop skills and muscles to do that thing better. So I think the first cue is like passion. What are the things that you have some really strong emotional connection to? Because those are the things that we're typically to stick with longer. Because here's a fact. Unless you magically find out that you're gifted, we all kind of stink at everything that we do for the first time. That's just the way it works, right? You watch a little kid learning how to walk, they just face plant painfully again and again and again, but they know that that's how learning works. So pick something that you're passionate about or extraordinarily curious about and go explore. And I think sometime in our 20s, maybe sometimes early 30s, you've done enough exploring. Now you need to ask the question. There's a, what is it called? Ikigai. I don't know if you've heard of that, the Japanese principle for happiness. They have a matrix kind of like, what are the things I really am passionate about? Have I developed some skills in it? Can I stand out from the crowd? And does the world actually need it? That last bit is really got to do with profession. If you really love it and you're good at it and the world doesn't need it, that's called a hobby. If you're passionate about it and you become good at it and the world needs it, now that can be your profession. And go ahead and go all in and just realize, like anything, there may be ups and downs. But the extraordinary thing is actually finding someone who's done something these days for any amount of time. We're so used to getting on YouTube and learning how to do whatever, just like that. But that's not mastery, that's ability. And I think that there is a real reward, a massive payoff for those who are willing to go a little farther than their peers, instead of always dabbling, to make it a deep experience, a meaningful experience. And I can tell you, because I've been on that journey, I do not feel like I've reached the destination. And the irony is, the harder you work at it, the more you'll realize how much work you have to do. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, if you don't believe me. And the people who've done the least amount of work often think they're the best experts. But anyway, that's aside. It's just a really fun journey if you're willing to do it. So passion, hopefully ability comes from time on the task. And then you've got a fork in the road. Is this something that's valued out in the world? And if it is, you might be able to make a profession out of it. If it's not, you might have a lifelong hobby, right? I like to fly fish. I like to be in the outdoors. I'm not good enough at either to be professional, but I don't think the world needs my services there as much as they need it in other areas.
I love what you're just explaining and sharing. That's of great value in really an advice, and it's very consistent to some of the really most successful leaders I have seen and personally, because I take a deep interest of the most successful athletes, the most successful entrepreneurs. And I want to see different categories, not just one. I want to see is there a link between philosophies? Is there something in common? And you talked about great leadership earlier.
Well,
you mentioned.
Hold on. Can I make a comment? Like,
Sure.
You're interested. I am too. In my experience, I'm sorry, I'm turning the tables on you.
No, please.
When I interview people that are in the top 1% of whatever they do, and that's something I'm intensely curious about, and so is Gary, that we've made that part of our job description, is if you run into someone and they say that they are a world champion dog trainer, I'm gonna start talking to them, and I'm gonna start asking a lot of questions. It might even sound like an interrogation. It doesn't really matter what the category is. If they're really exceptional, I want to find out about their journey. Now, you've been curious about that too. In my experience and in our observation, they have a lot more in common, no matter what they're doing, than not. It's not like if you talk to a champion bodybuilder and then a champion chess player, they're doing very different things, but in my experience, their approaches often has a lot of overlap. Was that your experience as well, Marian?
Absolutely,
Okay.
And in fact, when you see, like, often when you look at those leaders or those champions, what they have done and how they made it, you may not find out that they may be normal people that have gone into it and developed that deep passion and conviction in what they wanted to do, and they looked at, obviously there are a few things that they have in common with the Olympic medal winners and what sets them apart, and this kind of study is exceptional and very interesting to see of what is in common there. What are the things that separates them from the rest? And here I want to talk about leadership.
Of course.
Because
thank you for that little interlude. I just was curious about you get to talk to a lot of successful people too.
And when you said that, just ask a lot of questions. I know so much because sometimes they'll tell me. But I ask the questions because I'm naturally curious. I learn a lot from asking questions. I love to. My way of receiving information is to listening to a lot of things and watching and asking and going through and I don't see people for what they are. I see them for what they can be, and that's a natural strength that I have, and I can see way beyond what they're doing, and I can paint a big vision, and that's how I inspire them. And of course, I like to take care of them. That's something that comes naturally in what I do, and being blessed to be surrounded some exceptional leaders from all over the world, and a team, in fact, and we're getting more and more, and it's just naturally coming because it's not for me how much money you make, but it's what you donate or what you give, or how do you serve. Right. This is the more of a metrics that I'm interested in. What do you do while you live? It's of course you have certain basics, but Jay, after a certain moment, once you cover some of the basics, your living and house, and so what else is there? And then I encourage people. Well, if we live well and healthy for the next 10, 15 years. The likelihood of medicine and healthcare is that our average life expectancy could be over 150 years old. So what are we going to do for the next 100 years or so? So I'm just asking people, they told me about a vision of 10 years. Well, great, but what is your 100-year vision?
Yeah.
A lot of unicorns out there are coming out. I know they'll die because they will burn out or just even the values, and I can very quickly see that what the foundations they started on, that they might not make it beyond the 5-10 year mark in that. So I looked at that longevity aspect as well. So there's a few matrix that I look, and the principles that I use that have served so well, and finding out. And I can tell you with investments, I know they have these investment funds that maybe they do, like the 10% rule, or, you invest 20 and then you get 2 right. I think that can be significantly improved. Yes. If you apply certain methodology in that. But we're talking about leadership.
They say even a broken clock's right twice a day. So let's not use that as our goal.
For sure. Absolutely. And I'm just so deeply interested in really leadership, and what makes, in your definition, what makes a great leader in today's world?
Well, I've been raised in this organization, and leadership to us is very specific, and we have kind of a formula around it. And it's mission, vision, beliefs, mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspective. Sorry, it takes a little bit to get it out. And so the leadership is that person who says, mission, here's where we're going. Vision, this is what it's going to look like when we get there and along the way, right? That you can cast this very specific vision of where you're going, why it's important, and what the journey is going to look like. And that tends to attract people. You have certain beliefs, and those are kind of the rules of the road. Like, this is how we're going to treat each other. Values, these are the things that we hold dear along the way, right? And you get to the end of it, and you always ask for perspective. How are we doing? Like, leadership at the beginning, if you wanted to sum all of that up, that they're able to cast a very large vision and also bring culture to it. That would be the simplest way to put it. They know where they're going, and they know what the culture of the people that need to be going there together is going to look like. And that is really where it all starts. I think people they want to join Google or Apple or whatever, because they have a reputation for being not just places you can make a lot of money, but where a lot of smart people go and create the products that the world consumes. And so there is a certain level of excitement and pride around joining some of these companies. And that's where the vision, right, and that culture or whatever has become so big, it's been attached to the brand. So I think first and foremost, can you cast a vision, right? Can you either create or at least foster culture? Those are really, really important traits in leadership. And then we don't spend a lot of time on management philosophy. We have some protocols, right, around how we meet with and work with the talent around us. But we made a principal bet, and this is one of the things that we teach. If you just start with better employees, you don't have to be an amazing manager. I think a lot of the challenges people have is that they're actually quite unclear about their own vision and culture. So they're attracting people that may not be a perfect match. They aren't clear about the job description, right? They aren't really clear what that person has to do to be really successful. And so they don't set great expectations, and they don't find great matches. So this lack of clarity about where they're going, who they are, what they need, and what that person would look like and do, often kind of short circuits things from day one. And then they look up 6 months later, a year later, and they said, that Jay was a horrible hire. And I mean, I've had to let people go. There's no perfect system. But like, one of the first things I acknowledge when I'm letting someone go is that that I'm complicit in that. And that I'm the one who said yes. Right? They came knocking on the door looking for a job, and I'm the one who said, you're it, if I hired them. So I'm going to own my own DNA in that. So when I think about leadership, those are just that's a smorgasbord, right? That's a lot of stuff to cover. But vision, culture, getting really clear, right? If I say that our culture is growth oriented, what does that mean to you? Like, I personally, in my growth category, I try to read a book a week. That's the challenge. I usually fail, by the way. I usually read about 40, 45 a year. I've never made it past 50. And I won't cheat by doing easy books, but I set a very aggressive goal there. I might have someone who works for me that would define that as one book a quarter, because the average person does not read 4 books a year. And for them, that would represent, I'm growth oriented. I think we have to get specific. What does it mean when we say we are a growth oriented company? What does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis? And if you get a little bit more dialed in, then we can set better expectations. I think the tragedy, and this really bugs me, I've actually got a quote from Keith Cunningham. He's a local author that I'm a big fan of, Keith Cunningham. Go look him up. The Road Less Stupid.
Fantastic.
He's really smart. And he just said, I was in one of his classes, and he said, nothing changes until what's unspoken is spoken. Nothing changes until what's unspoken is spoken. And I've repeated that. I repeat it to myself. And it's my reminder as a leader, I'm tasked with evaluating people. And that can feel like judgment, especially if I never speak how I feel about their performance, if I never set expectations, if I never share what the actual standard is. How can someone meet your standards if you never really share them? I think a lot of us are playing that game, and because we attracted really cool people, they meet the standard out of luck, not because we've set them up to be successful. So anyway, I take a lot of personal ownership in that part of the puzzle.
Couldn't agree more, to be honest. Before, if somebody's not, because I, as a leader myself and a leading organization, I see my role as someone that, of course, vision is very important. It's the values, what we stand for, and the culture we create, really taking care of each other's back, so we can, taking care of each other, so we can take greater care of everyone else. It's so important in what we do. But what is very important is my role is I see as someone who really should set people up for success. The environment, everything you do. So it's not about just so in a way my role becomes like very internal oriented, taking care of them, and they take care of everything else. I mean, of course I do interact with clients and so forth, but I'm trying to give them a really kind of stage so they can own that, they can lead that. So in a way that I don't have to be at the center. I'd love the people, the people with a part of the organization, for them to be as equally strong as I am, if not stronger in cases. So people cannot say, who actually is so many great people. It's not like a clear leader and that's it. It's like really build that up. And so in a way, I like the independence, but I also like the togetherness and joy, because I know when we're together, we're stronger. So it's a very particular way of working, I guess. But it's just really to that passion to develop them and see them grow. Of course, you always have risk, because when you're successful, people you're targeted and your people, of course. But I'm not worried about this, because the vision when you have and people stay, that you can do something so great that the right people will be there, the destiny helpers will come and help and do something extraordinary if you keep doing the right thing. But also the people that move on from you, they can bring some goodness to the other organization, so that it comes full circle. I think it's right. Like, it's just, but I don't know, what is your take and experience, and how much time you spend on what the one thing, that you do internally.
Well, the way I interact with my direct reports is we try to meet every week for about 30 minutes. And I don't have the most I've ever had at one time is about 11. I can handle about 5 to 7 comfortably. 11 was too much, and it was a mistake. I love it when I have less than 5, because then I can really go deep. And we just check in weekly on their goals. Do they have everything they need to succeed? And they bring their own accountability to those sessions, but we do lots of check-ins to make sure that we're aligned. That's kind of the way it looks. Philosophically, and this is a mouthful, but we kind of define, when we talk about caring for people, I think the way we would teach it is, if I'm going to care for my people, then I need to teach them to care for themselves. And we kind of define leadership here as teaching people how to think. And the long version is teach people how to think so they can do what they need to do when they need to do it, so they can get what they want when they want it.
I love
and
that.
If someone realizes that you're helping people be better thinkers, right, so that they can be better achievers, not just for you, but in their own life, they tend to stick around. And it tends to be a good win-win relationship in that they're performing for you in the business, but their lives are also performing. So I usually encourage managers, you can't require it here, it's illegal, but I usually encourage and try to earn the trust of the people that report to me, so that I'm not just seeing their professional goals week in, week out, that they're willing to share their personal goals. Because I've got experience there too. And if I can show them a better way to sleep better at night, or share with them my journey on maybe being a healthier human being, or whatever it might be, those are areas that matter, I think, just as much in the relationship as the professional mentoring and coaching. So anyway, that's, again, I keep throwing these monologues at you, and I'll hand the baton back to you, and you can respond or ask questions.
I'm very curious because because you mentioned at the beginning, personal, professional.
Yes.
And you also said, it triggered my curiosity. I almost asked you a question: how do you improve your sleep? when you kind of said, but just kind of coming back to personal, my wider question is, how do you take care of your personal well-being, Jay, and how do you care for you and your personal life?
Sure. I think that in the One Thing book, in the American edition, there's page 114. It's the only page I have memorized. We have 7 circles that you apply the One Thing philosophy: your spiritual life, your physical health, your personal life, your key relationships, your job, your business, your money. And those are just big buckets to think about, what's my one thing for? And the order is kind of important to us. It's your spiritual life, your physical health, your personal life, before you even get to other people. And we usually refer people back to, if you've ever sat on an airplane and you've heard them go through the safety roster, if you're sitting by a young child and the oxygen mask deploys, who are you supposed to put it on, the child or yourself first?
Of course, yourself, so you can put it on the child.
Right, because you might pass out without helping them. A lot of people forget that on the day-to-day. So I think that in order for us to care about others, we have to do a little self-care. And we need to be thoughtful about that, because a lot of times people spend all of their time tending to others and neglect themselves. And the reality is, if you do that long enough, you won't be there to help them anymore. You won't be able to. So I took those 7 circles with my wife, and we built habits and rituals in each of those circles. So, each evening we have a ritual whenever we eat dinner as a family. We still have 2 teenagers in the house, and we grab hands and we just say, what's one thing that you're thankful for? So we have a gratitude habit in our spiritual life. My wife and I, 3 times a week, we get up at 5:30, and before 6 o'clock, we're working out with a trainer. We've been doing this for over 10 years. But we made a commitment that long before our children were awake, we would get in a good hour workout at least 3 times a week. And we often do it together on Saturdays and Sundays too. So usually 4 to 5 workouts a week. And we just kind of look through those things and ask, and what do we do for our personal life? And on Wednesday nights, we have date night. And we did it on Wednesday nights because our kids were only 16 months apart. And if you try to have a regular date night on a Friday or Saturday night, at least where I live, good luck finding a babysitter. We had no family. So we actually, over 10 years ago, moved our date night to Wednesday night. And what's great is, Wendy can categorically tell me that we've had over 750 dates since then. And for 2 busy people, that little recharge in the middle of the week, we go to dinner, we go to a movie, we get to refresh ourselves, remind ourselves of why this relationship's important. We work out together, right? So we've built some things that are ritualized. It's not wait until you're exhausted and then check into a spa for a week. That's reactive. How can we really get ahead of the things that might undermine us, our health? We do the same thing for our diet. On Sundays, we cook a lot of food and we make our lunches for the week. I love food, don't get me wrong. And we go out and I will eat bad food. But I try to make sure that 2 meals every day are really good food. And that allows us to, usually we eat healthy at night too, but if we go out to eat for date night, I can have a piece of pie or a cake and I don't have to worry about it. So I try to be really thoughtful about the self-care. And I can say for my wife and I, this last year with COVID, the last 18 months, it's been really hard on a lot of people. So anyway, my recommendation around self-care is it's not an event, right? It's a process, and you need to be committed to it if you're really going to do extraordinary things.
Absolutely. And I also love what you just said. what makes you really strong and fit and have that abundance is not one time going to the gym, but every day going, you can go for one day and 9 hours workout won't make you fit, unless you go every day for 30 minutes. It's just,
have you talked to, I'm trying to think, James Clear? Have you gotten to interview him, the author of
not
Atomic
yet.
Habits?
Not yet.
I've talked to him a few times over the years, and he's very fit. He used to be, I think he was going to be a professional baseball player at one time. And we were talking, I had just done like 100 push-up challenge. It was just something to do. And he looked at me, and I just never forget. He goes, I made a decision a long time ago to just be the kind of person that goes to the gym every day and works out. And because of that, I'm never usually too far away. If I want to do 100 push-ups, I can probably do it. If I want to run a half marathon, I can probably do it. But it wasn't because I was training for an event, right? Because a lot of times people will set a challenge. I'm going to run a marathon. And then when the marathon's over, they stop running. And I love the way he said it. I just decided to be the kind of person who goes to the gym every day. And my wife and I, we changed our diet this last year, and I lost 30 pounds. She lost about the equivalent, and felt just completely renewed after like a period of COVID where we weren't as healthy diet wise. And I just said, look, we've now become the kind of people that eat a couple of cups of vegetables with every meal. Because if you eat a bunch of vegetables, you can still eat the other stuff, but you don't have a lot of room. And so it's amazing how like one little thing kind of massively transformed our diet from borderline healthy, but not going to make us live to 120 or 150, much less, to pretty darn healthy now. So anyway, back to you.
Fantastic. Wow, what a great way. So, I think you mentioned it's been a very difficult period for a lot of people during COVID, and but at the same time, I think when we go through such a kind of difficult moments, and maybe that's my, I guess, natural optimism that I have, but I always see the great things in that, that there's in those difficult moments, there are a lot of goodness.
That's unusual, Marian. It really is. I mean, if I don't do it naturally, I try to force myself. Is there a gift here? Is there a gift here somewhere so I can focus on that instead of the bad? But a lot of people really suffered this last year, especially if you were social, right? You couldn't travel. You couldn't eat in your restaurants. I don't know what it was like where you were. But from
lockdown in the UK was complete lockdown. But what I did, I built a quick kind of workout machine in my office, and I just became incredibly fit. I was already fit, but I just kind of could I could do things I never been able. I'm stronger than ever than I ever been in my even 20s or so. I actually started to really do other things, and it was difficult, of course, but it depends where you set your mind. And I said, that's the time to really add value and serve the world. So we started to create a lot of things, work out. It was really busy. I mean, it was so much work and after 2 years, not to mention had to take care of family and parents and so forth, that they had to go through difficult moments and all that. But I always kept saying, whenever I have a really difficult moment, I said, this is my best moment. This is my best moment. I keep saying that to me. And it's always worked out that fantastically well, even though it was very tough. I mean, life and death situation you've been in some cases, but it's just like when you have that really saying it and believing and living it, you got to keep going, go through the whatever need to go through, and on the other side there's some great things. And I always encourage you to say, hey, when a big loss is coming, the world is designed in such a way that a lot of goodness is coming to compensate that loss. It's just so I'm convinced that yes, a lot of suffering, a lot of people lost their lives, but look how many great things are coming in the flexibility of working, and it's just the way people are. That now, young people are starting to showing up all the strengths and weaknesses of those leadership. You see how they perform in these bad times as well. So.
Well, see, that's great. I think as leaders, I'll give you an example of my wife and I do an annual retreat. We get out, we go.
I heard about that. You do some fantastic retreats, by the way.
Yeah, and it just for 14 years we've been doing it, and just trying to stay on the same page, because we're busy people, and we have 11 businesses between us.
Wow.
I have a job, so I'm an executive, so I can't be the CEO of any of those businesses. So we've got a few balls in the air, and so we use that as a moment to get really clear about our priorities so that we can stay on top of everything. But she called it out. I think when the world was starting to open up a little bit again, we hadn't taken any real vacation time. And because in like a lot of business situations, a lot of employees, Zoom the virtual meetings can be endless.
Yeah.
And if you're working from home, when are you off work? And so I think a lot of people, and there were a lot of good reasons, like a lot of people, they didn't know if their business would survive, if they would keep their job, right? A lot of people were operating from a place of fear. And so they worked really hard. I know that we did. We weren't sure at all that our economy was going to make it. And as leaders, we were trying to do everything we could, not just to protect the company, but also people's jobs in it. So we were working way too much. We were not taking any time for ourselves. And we made a commitment. She just said, look, even if we can't travel, we've got to start taking long weekends, take a Friday off, take a Monday off, take a 4-day weekend and recharge. And so we made a commitment to do 6 or 7 of those. I think it was 7 in the first 7 months. And she goes, you realize, Jay, that none of your people will take time off if you don't take time off first. If you don't role model the behavior, they won't know that it's okay. And it was funny. I had this conversation with our leadership team and realized that everybody was in the same boat. They thought as leaders, they had to be the last man standing, right? Or last woman standing. They were going to go down with the ship. So they were working Saturdays and Sundays for almost the whole year. And I was like, you realize, like, you're leaders, you're executives, like, we have a lot of reasons, and we get actually remunerated, like, with pay to do that. A lot of our people are just following our lead. And they're doing it not out of opportunity or obligation, but out of fear. They don't want to lose their jobs. And if we don't hit the brakes, they're not gonna last. And so a lot of us made commitments, public commitments, to start taking more time off and holding our people accountable to taking time off. And I think some of what happened this year, they call it the Great Resignation. Have you heard about that? Something like 40% of all employees are actively looking for another job. I think some of it is just burnout. I think some of it is people, they worked really, really hard, and they're looking up and it's like, I'm not passionate about this. My boss is not passionate about my care. I'm going to go find better circumstances, and the job market is going to help me out right now because everybody is fighting for talent. So anyway, self-care, like your attitude, your optimism in the face of dark times, that's something, right, that you can share with your team, right? And that's like, my wife and I had an aha. It's like, hey, we're going to make this commitment. We can role model it for our team, because that way, if we can demonstrate that we're willing to maybe look past the bad and look for the good, or, you know what, maybe we won't hit every single goal this week, but we're going to take some time off so we can keep hitting our goals in the weeks to come. Maybe that can be one of the ways we show care for our people.
Fantastic, Jay. I love sharing, and thank you for giving really this, the examples of how do you take care of your relationship in your family, because my principle and philosophy is very simple. God, of course, is number one for me, family number two, and everything else, of course, follows. But what you just explained, how you do, how do you kind of organize the date nights, the retreat, the really how you work out together. These are fantastic examples of how really eating the kind of consistently the food, because that's how you really, that builds up if you do it every day or every week. And over 10 years, it's and no wonder, because health is, very rarely something sudden will happen. health is deteriorates over many years abusing something, of your body.
Was the old Hemingway line, how did you go bankrupt? Gradually and then suddenly. And I think there's a lot of things. Health is one of those. Usually you can be failing so slowly you think you're winning, but then it feels sudden. It's like, why am I having heart palpitations, right? And it is, wealth is another area, gradually then suddenly. And bad habits, you can feel like you're winning despite them for a very long time. And then they'll be suddenly you said the words gradually or suddenly, I can't remember which, but it triggered that quote in my head from Hemingway.
Absolutely. And gradually that feels suddenly, and it's absolutely, it's just an example. And I think when you learn those things, you can make a profound impact, positive impact, because I also feel that our families, they often see the worst of us. So they deserve the best of us as well. So that's what I'm saying. Whatever they are dealing with the worst moments of us, they deserve the best of us. So we gotta shine for them and give the best, and really kind of bring that passion back home to our children, to our closest, and really when I go back home, they might be fall asleep, they might be. But I'll give him a hug, to my son, and he's 8 years old, and he'll know. I told him I'll hug him, and just the things that I want to make sure, if I'm not passionate about something, at least I found a passionate coach. Maybe I could help him. He's passionate about football, and I've never pursued a career in football. Unlike some of his schoolmates that their dad's in professional football, Premier League, and that. So, but there's a different ways to care. And Jay, what excites you these days? What are the things that you really gets you going after you've seen so much? You've met so many people. What are the things that energizes you?
Well, one of my core values is impact. And so I really get excited when I feel like the things that we're doing are actually making a difference. There's a lot of the work we do that's really hard to measure and feel like it has an impact out there. And then there's some of the things that we get to do that we get to find out had a direct impact. So basically, my excitement meter is not, I love to create things, but I'm pretty clear, and the people who work with me will testify. Writing a great book, that's great, but it's got to have an audience. A great book without an audience has no impact. They're multipliers, right? How good was the book? How big was the audience? That's a multiplier. And I really, I think about that a lot when I make choices. So I use that value, impact, as a way to say yes and no. And that it doesn't always work the way you think. Sometimes I have to make a choice between meeting with someone one-on-one, and you think, wow, that's not a very big impact. But sometimes, because you've made it an audience of one or a small audience, you can help someone a lot more because you're able to go deeper and be more specific to their needs. Or you could look up and say, I've got a chance to coach one person on whatever, leadership, caring, or I can have that conversation on a podcast that might impact thousands of people. And so, that's one of the reasons I'm here, is that I get to increase the impact of our book, The One Thing, with a relatively small investment of my time. I can spend an hour with you, and you showed up and you wanted to talk about my book, and we can explore how it might apply. And then hopefully some people will go, wow, maybe that book is worth reading. But this is one of the places where our impact gets multiplied. Like, this is win-win. It's good for you and your audience, I hope. And it's definitely good for me. So I look at that word impact. That's the key. Is this actually going to make a difference? If it's not, it's just, I'm doing it for me. And that doesn't interest me as much anymore.
Fantastic. I love that. And the other thing is, we're not just here to promote ourselves. We're here to give back. That's our philosophy. And that's what we provide a platform for the leaders who care, that can really also connect and amplify their impact. So I look at it, it's not only here, but also for years and generations that are coming that can see that and go back to it. Jay, there's so many things that, of course, that are important, and I'm just thinking of, what is the one thing for a CEO, since I know you interview a lot of CEOs and leaders, that they should focus on
Well,
to
I'll
make
go back
a positive impact, or to to care for. What is the one thing that
Well, Gary and I created a podcast called Think Like a CEO, and
Mhm.
it's only got a few dozen episodes. We do little series, but I think season 2 we kind of break down the role of the CEO. And
Love to hear that. We're encouraging all the CEOs to take a look at that.
yeah, and I just I'll come back to that idea of it. Like it begins with this vision. I think the other thing they do, if they do that successfully, I've already I don't want to rehash what we talked about with vision and culture.
Yeah.
But that is the foundational piece.
Vision.
They create energy in the organization. And there's so many ways you can do that. I know some CEOs that show up and they create energy, and that's literally like they can drive revenue growth, right? They can just make the top line work. And then they also have to be ultimately the keeper of the culture and standards on the backside. And so I think that attracting talent is another essential piece of that. So if you can kind of have that vision and culture, if you can create energy, right? And that might be you personally driving revenue and growth, or attracting the kinds of people that can do that for your organization. I think attracting talent is ultimately your CEO should be the ultimate closer. If you're trying to bring a really talented individual on board, I mean, like that should be like the person that you just pull out when nothing else works. Well, could I introduce you, right, to our CEO? Let me introduce you to Marian. I'd like you to see who you'd be working for. And hopefully that's the ultimate closer so that the business attracts talent. And then, like I said, standards. So I think
it sounds familiar. I've been doing a lot of that, and I love doing it because I love working with people, and comes naturally. And not only, since we're in the business of helping leaders fulfill their vision, and by surrounding them with some of the most disruptive and caring teams that can not only help them fulfill their vision, but make the journey enjoyable. That's what we can really of how can we do that profoundly. There's so many other things. One question that our dear friend Stoyana wanted to ask here, and I couldn't resist, and as many, but
sure.
Is achievements and fulfillment. Can one have both? What would be your advice on the super achiever out there in terms of building the sweet spot, their own balance in achieving large goals while living fully?
So what's the point of goals?
Well, isn't it to fulfill a vision? Well, at least if you put a goal, that's
the way we look at it. I think that's true. But fundamentally, goals are just so that we can act appropriately today. And so most big things, really exciting things, don't happen in a week or a month. Like I'm going to write a best-selling novel. I'm going to create a company. They're going to happen over many years. But if you set a goal to be the industry leader in your area, and it's a 5-year goal, how do you know how to behave this week? Goals help us get there, right? Because you can break them down. We call it goal setting to the now in the book. Based on our 5-year goal, what do we have to do this year? Based on our 1-year goal, what do we have to do this month? Based on our 1-month goal, what do we do this week? Based on our weekly goal, what do we do today? And based on what I have to do today, what do I need to do right now? Like you can work backwards from your vision to a lot more specificity about what you should be doing in order to achieve that goal in the future. So to me, achievement in itself is hollow unless there is purpose attached to it. And so if you aren't in some way striving for your values, making them real in the world for you or for other people, if you can't attach meaning to that work, it won't ultimately be fulfilling. And you might get paid well for it, right? You might become a billionaire for it, but fulfillment is different. Fulfillment, let's put it this way, you might be proud of yourself, but hopefully there's more to it than that. I've been tasked with doing some things that were very challenging, that I didn't want to do, that didn't completely align with where I wanted to go. And I still felt some level of fulfillment just because I made myself do something hard, right? And that's a great muscle to make strong in your life, because a lot of the things that we truly want, we have to do hard things to achieve them. But I think that it's very likely that most of us can attach meaning to whatever it is we're doing. And I'll give you one example. Fulfillment, right, to me is like there's meaning behind this beyond the actual achievement of the goal. I was talking to a lady several years ago, and she had been kind of capped in her business. Every year she was doing about 12 million worth of business, and she just couldn't break through. And 12 million is a very high level of success, right? Wouldn't we all love to have that much? So she was doing very well, but she just like was thinking about quitting. Like she'd been stuck there for so long. And I said, if you quit, what would you do? And she goes, well, I'd probably volunteer 100% of my time at an animal shelter, because I'm really passionate about animals, and that's a cause that I just feel very deeply. And I said, all right, so if you start volunteering at an animal shelter, will your impact be reduced? Like, because you're not making money anymore. And she goes, I think I'll be okay. I said, well, let's flip it. So if you think you'll be okay, could you continue to sell real estate? And maybe all the income above 12 million that you make, you could donate to those charities. Do you think that would get you excited about real estate again? And she didn't actually make a commitment to me then, but we planted a seed together. I saw her a year later, and she had done 20 million.
Wow.
And she had looked up and she goes, my sales, had gone up by whatever percentage that is, from 12 to 20 million. And that's top line, by the way, that's not net. And so she's like made all these sales. And I said, well, what was it? She realized I wasn't working for me anymore, because clearly 12 was enough for me. But when I realized I could be the lead donor at these animal shelters, I had a lot more reasons to keep working. So that was her specifically. She brought meaning to her work. And because there was meaning there, she found that her ceiling of achievement was a lot higher than she would have originally guessed. So that's a challenge for all of us. You don't need to go quit your job and go wander in, the mountains, and, you don't have to do that. But you can start a journey of, what is the impact I would like to make for myself, for my family, for my town, for my company, for the world, however big or small you want to think, but what is the impact that you want to make? Now, how can what I'm currently doing, you should always start there. You're there for a reason. Something led you to where you are. And usually it's our heart that's in charge, not our head. You made some choices that made you there. And hopefully they weren't all bad choices, but you're there for a reason. Let's start with the assumption that there was something that led you there that matters. Now tap into it and see if you can make it grow really big.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing and dividing those two, of the passion and fulfillment. Personally, I couldn't agree more. I have a very simple formula. I'm on God's payroll. So wherever He guides me, I do these kind of things, that gives me fulfillment, passion, and everything I need. So, so I have it all in one package. But, it's just that kind of really finding that thing that and guide you to do the right thing, and really making a positive difference, making the world a better place, to the left of you, to the right of you, everything, every single day. It's exciting, and every day is a gift when you have it. So
yeah, I'll say this on it. That journey for folks is simple. Don't make it complicated, but it's also not easy, right? So give yourself some grace and give yourself some time to figure it out. Just like we were talking very early on about the young people, give yourself some grace, go experiment. Try some things on and see what ignites you. It's okay. You don't have to know the answer overnight. It's not a rush. It's not a competition. But I would hope that that's probably the most important questions that they can ask. How can I bring more meaning to my life and my work? Because we spend a lot of our lifetime at work. And if we can bring more meaning to it, ultimately, I think we'll lead better lives.
Fantastic. Jay, any final words for our audience? You've been fantastic. Thank you so much for really sharing all this wisdom. We'll break it out to smaller pieces and distribute it. But anything else that you wanted to add?
No, you've let me ask you as many questions as you asked me. So thank you for being such a gracious host. I appreciate it. And I hope that this is going to help you and hopefully make an impact for you and your followers.
Surely will, Jay. Thank you so much, and God bless.
Thank you so much.